And call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Dubay,
Here.
Fox,
Here.
Getz,
Here.
Green,
Here.
Leathers,
Here.
Lees,
Here.
Young.
Here.
All right, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Do we need to do a roll call vote for that?
I suppose,
Okay,
since we have two.
roll call vote.
Dubay,
Yes?
Fox,
Yes.
Getz,
Yes.
Green,
Yes.
Leathers,
Aye.
Lees,
Yep.
Young.
Right, do we need to, given that Angie is off-site, do we need to appoint a clerk to be able to sign any documents today?
Would be nice.
Yes. Kathy, can I appoint you as our clerk for today?
Yes.
Do I need to take a vote on that?
Nope.
Nope, all right, you're
Clerk of the day.
clerk of the day, thank you. All right, we will jump right in with our superintendent's report with Superintendent Kranz.
Chair DeBay, members of the Austin School Board, Austin community, just a couple quick items, a couple items, I don't know how quick they'll be. First of all, we continue on a weekly basis to receive guidelines from MDE and MDH about reopening. Nothing specific yet. They keep pushing the date, or announcing the date will be that last week in July, the week of July 27th. I do know that at last Friday's Big Nine Superintendent's meeting, the Minnesota Association of School Administrators met with the commissioner and some representative. Actually, they didn't meet with the commissioner, they met with the deputy commissioner to talk about the possibilities, and they're sticking to that date, which is okay, as long as we know that. Trouble is, we do have school that'll be starting that week on July 28th. And that's the next item I'd like to talk about, is the Sumner opening, just to bring you up to speed on where we're at in terms of Sumner. And right now we're at one section with 19 students at Woodson for that opening. We've been meeting, what you've seen in my weekend review, on a regular basis to plan, and we've had lots of people involved in that opening planning. Now it's gotten a little more specific, and different areas will be meeting, the facilities folks, the transportation folks, food service folks, curriculum and instruction people, on how this opening will take place. Basically, looking at the guidelines that we have, and I did receive a letter last week from MDE, and we've been requesting a letter for months on how we should reopen our balanced calendar. We got it last week, and it said we are to abide by the summer school guidelines, not by the fall school opening, because we don't have them, but by summer school. Summer school opening guidelines requires 50% in the building and social distancing. So that's the guidelines that we'll be opening under. Now, looking at that, Brian and his staff, along with Sheila and our central office team, have been working on how we best can do that. Looking at the addition of 2 huge spaces there, which we're converting the library into a learning suite, and taking the old auditorium and turning that into a learning suite, which basically adds 6 classrooms to that area, then utilizing a classroom that was converted to the library. And we did move, if you recall, off-site the early childhood classes. That has freed up enough space with the enrollment, and we're anticipating, because we did send out a parent survey to gather parent input on who would bring their child, allow their child to come back to school. About 70% of the Sumner staff, or Sumner parents, would send their kids back to school. So considering those numbers and the space, we believe we can bring all the summer students back. And then we'll provide, we still have to provide distance learning for any parent who chooses that. We don't have a choice, we have to do that, we have to provide that, so we'll do that. So those are kind of the overall arching details. Well, our plan is on the 28th to bring all of our students who choose face-to-face back to Sumner with distance or social distancing and 50% capacity in the rooms. It's not 50% of the class size, it's 50% of the capacity of each of the rooms and spaces, with utilizing all the spaces, including gyms, those rooms I talked about, other spaces. We know we have enough space to hold all of our students who wish to. We even would have enough space for all the students to come back at Sumner, should the parents choose to do that. John, do you have more detail than that you'd like to share?
Just want to mention first and foremost that we're recognizing that the idea of opening Sumner is really to be a bridge until we get to that point of the rest of the school district being able to open based upon whatever direction we're given by MDE and MDH for the entire state. And so the notion of this maybe even being a model necessarily that the rest of the district will follow is not really on the table. It's more, let's get Sumner up and running based upon its calendar, and then by that point we'll find out what it is that we have to do. And so really this is a scenario which really feeds into what we know in terms of the best interests of Sumner and that population. As David said, we sent out a survey to parents and teachers at this point. Some of the information we've gotten back from them have really built kind of what our plan is. We heard a lot from parents that said, you know, this is an option that they really wanted. They wanted to see their kids back in school, especially among our 45-15 calendars. But always with the idea of equity and safety foremost in everything that we're doing. And so we're looking to do that particular model. As David said, it's going to be at a 50% capacity. Students will spend part of their day at Sumner and then part of their day at home. We're really looking to just, again, give them a good kick start. We also know that Sheila's been doing a lot of research, reading, you know, what would be best for students, because we also know we have elementary students and what their needs are might be different from a high school student. And so we really want to give these students the best start. And then again, once we get the guidance from MDE, we'll certainly follow that guidance, whatever that happens to be, and that will be how we then pivot to the rest of the district. So,
what is the game plan for communicating with parents? What's going on?
so I know that we've already sent out a survey to parents to indicate, here's what we're looking at offering you. Would you like this model, or would you like to participate in distance learning? So I know we were getting feedback already. As of today, we already got some feedback that we were getting some numbers in. We have success coaches calling parents as well, because we know language can sometimes be a barrier to making informed decisions. And so we're really working on getting all those families communicated with, and that's how they're gonna know what the plan is. Because we want them to be able to make a fully informed decision based upon what they wanna do. Whether they wanna participate in the plan that we have for Sumner, or whether they wanna participate in distance learning. Because as David alluded to, no matter what option is on the table for Sumner or the rest of the district, we know we're being told distance learning has to be an option for parents to choose.
And so then, this is jumping ahead of the game, but are we in discussion on how we are gonna be testing kids, or how we're gonna do diagnostic of where they're at and where we need to take them, knowing that there's been this upheaval between?
So I appreciate that, and I think we're talking about that in all sorts of models. You know, we always have done fall benchmarking anyway. That's part of our regular routine. It's part of what we've been doing for years, because we know even if we have spring benchmarking on a student, we really do need to know where they're at in the fall when they come to see us. And so that is something that we're talking about. I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned that, because the other thing we need to make loud and clear to everybody, and especially, you know, since we're live here, is that distance learning will be different for students and families, you know, coming out when we start the year. Distance learning had some different parameters on it in the spring, because that was something that was done quite quickly and as a quick response to what we were seeing. So we do know under the current guidance that distance learning is gonna look different. Distance learning is going to have some assessment pieces. Distance learning is going to have attendance. Distance learning is going to have a different set of grading and things like that, where in the past, because of the quick change, we wanted to be very accommodating for students and we wanted them to be held harmless. Now that we've had more time, it's going to look different. And so we need to communicate that to parents too, that when they're electing distance learning, it doesn't mean that they're electing distance learning and how it looked in the spring based upon that guidance. It's based on how it looks in the fall on the new guidance.
What are some of the parameters for that?
Attendance will be taken on a daily basis, and in some places it was taken on a weekly basis, so it'll be taken on a daily basis. I believe, we haven't heard anything yet around ideas of truancy. We were told in the past, you know, when it came to distance learning, that truancy was one of those things that we're kind of holding a little softer. I think the grading that we're gonna see back in distance learning in the spring, we kind of use the quarter marker as a, this is the lowest grade you're gonna get. Well, now that we're starting with distance learning, all grades are gonna count straight away. And so those are just some initial things that will be very different for parents and families to see.
How are we supporting the teaching staff, the support staff? How are we preparing them for, whatever hybrid we're looking at? How are we ensuring that they feel comfortable going back to work in the school building? What's the story with faculty and staff?
There's a few things, and yet more to come, okay? Because I know it feels late, it's July, but yet again, we still don't even know what it looks like, but I can give you a few answers. Number one is, Mark Raymond out of HR has developed a survey, and so we are getting some initial responses back from faculty. From those, we'll use that to respond appropriately based upon what we're seeing from them. We're actually seeing some really encouraging numbers in terms of what percentage of faculty are saying, you know what, we're comfortable coming back. That being said, we're always going to do whatever the MDH guidelines are when it comes to sanitation and those types of things, so those pieces are in place. We've already made a commitment to the idea of back to school looking very differently this year. Typically, we've done some things where it comes to like back to school, district-wide things. We've committed to giving all of that time back to buildings to give the teachers to get ready. Now, do we know if that's enough? Probably not. But at the same time, that's where we're going to at least start. Now, depending upon what we hear from MDE and how we're able to adjust some things, we're also, you know, we have calendars that we have to maintain as well. So depending upon what we hear, we may be able to get creative on some things for PD and time. But we also know that invariably all of our teachers are probably already, even today, thinking about how are they going to do distance learning different versus even, you know, what could hybrid look like. But we also know that hybrid is probably going to be the most difficult to implement of them all. You know, we know how to do face-to-face. We have done distance, though we know there's some improvements and there's some differences to what hybrid is gonna look like distance learning is gonna look like for us. But we've already committed to developing some time and setting aside some time for our teachers. Because that's really a lot of it is just time. There's just so much unknown yet.
I know.
This next 2 weeks is gonna feel like an
unfair
eternity.
question.
Well, and it's the hard part is it feels like this is time where we could be planning hard. But at the same time, we're not sure what we'd be planning for, you know, and so it's such a catch-22 because this is generally the time period at which, you know, things are quote unquote quiet. And so we could really be doing a lot of planning. And so we're doing as much as we can, not knowing what it is exactly gonna look like.
What are the options? Don't you have options?
We have 3 options that are on the table. They're all very different. There's distance learning, which we talked about. There's face-to-face, and then there's a hybrid. And that would be some combination of the 2.
John, David said that, I talked to David about the MDE survey of parents wanting their students to come back to school. It was like 64%. David and I talked about that. David said that you people sent out a survey to our people.
Right.
You said that Mark conducted some sort of survey as well. Have you surveyed parents and students about their reactions to distance learning last spring?
Yep.
And what did you find out?
So that survey is still in play yet, so we haven't gotten the data back. we'll share that with you when that survey closes. But yes, so the survey, there's 2 surveys out there that we're talking about. Survey 1 is to parents and students of 512. Okay, so the students 512 as well as parents. And really, it revolved around a few things. One was their reactions to distance learning last fall, what went well, what didn't go so well. One of them is if you were faced with face-to-face, or if we were faced with coming back face-to-face, would you elect face-to-face or would you do distance learning? And then one is under that hybrid model, we offer them a number of different options, like an AB schedule, an every other week schedule, an every 2-week schedule, an abbreviated day schedule. Which ones could they do? We didn't ask them for a preference there, we just asked them of these different models, which one would work for you and your family, which ones wouldn't, and by default then which ones wouldn't work. And then we also asked them things like, what is the single most thing that we can do to make you feel more comfortable coming back? And what is the one thing that most concerns you about coming back? So again, we're getting that information currently. We also we asked them to tell us what calendar they were operating under, so that way we could go ahead and disaggregate the 45-15 data first.
Other than attendance and truancy, how is the new guidance of the distance learning beginning in fall? How is that going to be different, or don't you have any idea?
We haven't got that, right?
We haven't gotten that far yet. We do know that, for instance, the grading piece that I talked about before, grading is a little different. Assessment will probably be a required piece that'll be different. We're also hearing that regardless, it sounds like the MCAs are gonna be back in play next year regardless of the model. Only because, again, we're starting the year under a model now instead of having to quickly change. So, so I think that it's going to be a little bit more of a heavier lift in terms of requirements that we'll see of students in distance learning will be having to participate more like what we're seeing students within a classroom do.
I mean, I saw some wonderful examples of distance learning, particularly at IJ Bolton. And if I were a teacher right now, I would just really be sweating bullets. I would be, like you said, Carolyn, the great unknown. It's really a unknown entity that these individuals are facing.
Well, the thing that worries us the most about hybrid is it's asking teachers, many teachers, it may be asking them to do both.
Yeah.
And that's frightening. That's a heavy lift. Whereas we might be able to consolidate some resources if we're able to do in-person and distance, where we can assign some teachers to be the distance learning teachers, and that's what they focus on, versus some that would then solely focus on the in-person learning. So I think we could do some things differently. I think some of the feedback pieces we're getting too, relative to distance learning, is if we can provide more opportunities for some social emotional things. So if we could provide some opportunities for kids just to simply log on and have conversations with their classmates that are moderated by a teacher, those would be good things. And so we are learning some things from the feedback too that we'll be able to think about how can we implement that should we be faced with the distance learning model.
Like David said, was it in summer school where the media center and the auditorium would be utilized for classrooms? Are we gonna have to hire additional personnel? Because we're gonna have smaller classes, maybe more classes. Are we gonna require more teachers, or are there more teachers out there?
Right now, our plan for that, Sheila's working on the schedule. Matter of fact, as John said, we sent out just a survey specific to Sumner parents, got feedback on that. She now has her success coaches and some of her staff that are calling those that haven't responded to see where they're at, to find out what our needs would be. But our plan preliminary, again, this is all preliminary, granted it's 2 weeks away, so it's coming up pretty quickly, is to utilize our specialists to allow for that 50% capacity numbers in the classrooms. So all of them have to have a license, teacher's license, put them in place on the reduction in those spaces to make that happen. So that's going to have to allow for some other contractual issues that we have to look at, bathroom time for a teacher. And if we don't have a specialist to cover when the teacher, when are they going to do that? When are they going to do their planning? Because they have to have a period a day that's supposed to be for planning. When are they gonna eat lunch? They have to have a 30-minute, and that's state statute, a 30-minute duty-free lunch. So those are things we all have to consider as we go through that. And now, those are things that Sheila is working on, we're working with her to make sure that all that, Mark and his team are working to make sure that the contract is held. And the other thing that's important to understand is the teacher, the union leadership is alongside us, as well as the last meeting we had secretaries, food service, custodians, every unit was there to help with that planning, so they all knew where they were at. The key to Don and board is, as John said, this is a bridge, because we know we're under summer school guidelines, not under opening, and we're hearing, as John pointed out, the opening of the fall is gonna be entirely different. But what we do hope is that we'll learn a lot about what we can and can't do in terms of that spacing, how kids will react to masks or shields, how they'll react to those gathering places, and put in place modified procedures to help that along. Transportation obviously would be a key. Originally, they said we could transport 15 kids in a bus. Well, 15 at Sumner, well, we got 50, 60 buses, we could do that. But we're talking 5,000 kids? There's no way. We'd have to spend probably, Lori, what's the number, some odd $1 million to buy the buses to transport the kids? I think the state finally realized they couldn't afford, districts couldn't afford to do some of the stuff they originally talked about. So those are the things that they've modified. Now it's up to 40-some kids that we can transport on a bus. And we luckily put in place our tiered busing, which really, I mean, we'd like to say we take credit, we foresaw this, but if we didn't, but it really will help because it splits the amount of kids that we're transporting.
I need to give Peggy and Angie an opportunity to ask
Okay,
questions,
sure.
because I know that we are dominating the conversation in the room. So Peggy and Angie, do you guys have anything you have questions about regarding this?
I do. John mentioned a couple times that grading for the distance learning will be different. And I just want to clarify, is it different than it was in the spring, or will it be different than the expectations in the classroom?
Good clarification, different from what it was in the spring. It's going to
So
look
they'll be
more
held to
like,
the standards whether they choose the distance learning or choose to go in person to class.
no, those will be I'm very likely those grading parameters will be the same for both of those, in person and distance. Is that the question?
It is.
Yep.
So given that the expectation that the grades will be looked upon similarly,
Yep.
are we prepared for the argument that like kid doesn't get as much attention from the teacher because he or she is doing distance learning, even though that was their choice? Are we prepared
Well,
for that?
first of all, Peggy, it won't be that child's
Yeah.
teacher. That assumption has to go by the wayside, because we cannot ask that teacher to be doing both in-person and distance learning. The in-person teacher will be teaching those students that they deal with. There'll be another different teacher or teachers assigned to distance learning. They all do the same curriculum, etc., but they'll be the ones that'll be teaching the distance learning students. So they'll be in charge of the daily lessons and the assignments and grading those, then will be the other teacher. So it won't be that, well, the kids in person are getting more time than, no, it'll be about that distance learning teacher will be their teacher. Does that help clarify?
But
It does.
I hear what you're saying, Peggy, and I think it's contingent upon us, and as we mentioned before, it's going to be contingent upon us in terms of communication to help parents understand that, and maybe even to the degree to which putting on at least some degree of, this is what you're going to need to be able to do to be successful in this environment. you're right, I mean, just with anything, we get lots of great conversations over the course of any academic year, and so you're absolutely right, this is something that could come up. However, again, it's going to be important for us to communicate, this is the way you're going to be graded, just like you would be in a classroom, and so you need to be prepared for that when making your decision.
How about the activities?
Haven't heard a thing.
Whole another ballgame. No pun intended.
Yes, I have a quick question. So, if you can hear me okay?
No,
No?
You're good.
it's a close.
I can hear you. Are they having trouble hearing you in the room?
You're good.
You're fine. Go for it.
Okay. Okay, so I have a quick question. So if MDE comes out with their guidance on June 27th, does that affect Sumner at all in their plans to move forward with summer school, kind of the summer school model for the year?
No.
For the year.
Oh, for the
So,
year,
when it
absolutely.
transitions-
There will be a transition point.
Sumner will transition to the traditional calendar at the September timeframe.
I see, okay.
And to be clear, that's not transitioning to the calendar, they'll be transitioning to that
The model.
model.
Model, yes, good point,
That's something that could
Yeah.
easily be misconstrued.
good point, yep.
Okay.
And back to a point that Don had made earlier too, it's one of the things that we need to do, and we're in the process of doing too, is we're gonna end up having to do an analysis across our district of all the teaching licenses we have.
Alright.
I mean, at some point, Ryan might have to come back to a math classroom for an hour or two, and maybe even David. So, I mean, it's one of those things where we have to look across the land at everyone possible, because this will be a roll up your sleeves and really have to help out, even in subbing situations. That's something we haven't even talked about, right? But at a certain point, we may have to do some double duty for a little bit in order to get through this, knowing that it's a unique situation.
And I know we have 4 board members that are licensed teachers.
Exactly.
Set that? Yeah.
One of
Community
them
experts.
trying to
I also
suffer
can drive
26
bus.
years.
Is that in the minutes?
I think it might be now. Well,
As-
it went out live online.
Yeah.
How do the teachers fit into this thing now? What if they're, don't wanna put themselves in this predicament?
Well, there's going to be a whole set of protocols around that, and Mark will be able to answer that in probably the future, unless he
He's
wants
right
to
here.
answer it right now.
So the issues that arise is we'll be dividing staff into a couple of different categories based upon medical need or as what's been discussed a lot of times through HR is just a fear of COVID. Unfortunately, the fear of COVID is not a medical condition. It's not something that can be responded to on our end. In the case of a medical condition, we'll work with them with our allocated leaves such as sick leave, personal time, unpaid leave, and requests for leave of absence in order to accommodate what they need in order to work through this time. We're hoping that there's going to be a need for some people to be working on distance learning. We know that the number of people working on distance learning might not match up to the number of people that could possibly have a medical reason for why they're unable to work in the system as it currently is. Our intent is to try and work with every one of our teachers, every one of our employees, so that we can find ways to make sure that they feel safe within the building, first and foremost, and then from that position, try to work out and meet any needs that we can by bringing them into the building.
And I know Mark has been meeting, if not daily, it's pretty close daily with the union representation to make sure all this is clear to the teachers, to all of our units. So it's not something that,
It shouldn't be a surprise.
no, thank you.
We've been trying to be very transparent with what our process will be as we work our way forward, and they'll be getting additional information as we transition towards from July to August, and again from August to September.
You know, I worked at the Y and they did send out a short survey asking your attitude toward returning to work when the place opens, and it was absolutely unsure, doubtful. So if you put down unsure, you might not come back.
We sent out a very similar survey to our staff. We've had 500 responses, so we're well over 50% of our entire employee base. We've had 80% of our teaching base respond to that survey. 56% of our respondents say they have no concerns whatsoever in returning to the building, and 18% of our respondents have a concern. So the two ends of the continuum, 56% of them have no concerns whatsoever. The opposite end of that scale that we had was they have a concern is 18%. In between there were two more, one being a slight concern, that was about 24%. So we're shifting much heavily towards the people ready to come back to school and are comfortable with some of the measures that we put into place to take care of our building and our facilities and our employees.
That's another part of the questionnaire is, what do you feel safe with? And that's why Brian and his group, and a critical component of the planning too, is, okay, we're seeing a lot of people who feel this is important in terms of virus control, spread, those sort of things, so that's an issue. Hand sanitizers in each room, mask wearing, those sort of things. What is it that people, what is it we can do that will help people feel safe?
The Smart Bus, they went out and bought a couple of, machines that blow mist into the buses. Cause I mean, if you had 3 janitors at the high school and you had to sanitize every room by doing this, they'd never get done. Have you, is that something you've ever heard about?
Yeah.
Those
Brian-
misters or whatever they're called?
Brian, we've looked at UV, I don't know, all kinds of different light systems and.
Brian's been using a very similar technology since March of last year. So Brian's been very proactive on this situation. And we've got the equipment in order to make sure that we can sanitize and disinfect spaces with the current staff that we have very readily.
But that's also a communication piece that we've talked about quite a bit too, is the fact that you can do that and no one necessarily is going to notice that the room the room might not look clean. Like there might still be dust, but it's actually
Garbage might not be empty.
but it's been disinfected. So that's, again, some things that we're learning through the survey that we need to make sure we clearly communicate too.
But it's some kind of a liquid, so maybe on the surface, there might be some residue liquid in the morning when you come into your classroom. And you know then that they've gone in and fumigated or whatever the word is.
The easiest indicator is that any paper that you leave out is starting to grow.
I expect we will hear a lot more next month ahead of the traditional calendar opening, yes?
Because of what we hear from MDE.
Alright,
So don't anticipate a lot until we hear, if we don't get a lot, you're not gonna get a lot.
I sure
Therein
hope we
lies the problem.
hear a lot more.
I
Mid-August, we should probably be hearing something. I would
preliminarily,
be worried if we didn't.
yeah, preliminarily, I think they're not in a much different place than we are, just trying to figure it all out.
Right, do you have more in your report?
Nope, that's
That was
it.
it?
Yep.
Well, and you do need money from the federal level, don't you? I mean, schools do need money to pay for those things that we just talked about. I mean, they're coming out of our budget and they weren't, allocated or whatever.
And Lori can give you a quick, just this spring, the excess costs that we had, were just barely covered with the new CARES money. But the problem is, the thinking is, oh, that's plenty of money, that should be able to cover you getting started. Well, it isn't enough, so,
It's a whole other game, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, so the lost revenues or additional expenses was almost 800,000. And the federal monies like CARES Act, so forth, is like 1.1 million. So we'll have to,
But we
And
have to
it's
share that
built-
with the non-publics too.
right, and we can utilize that one-time money over a 2-year period, so we'll just have to, I'll analyze how to maximize the use of it. Get the best bang for our buck.
But we're hoping that it would be nice if Congress decided, doesn't sound like we'll get anything, at the executive level. But Congress might be able to override that and get us some more,
When they get done with their vacation.
yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
That was a lot to talk through. I know that was an important conversation though, so I appreciate all the updates. Does anybody have any school board reports?
Are we having a study session in July?
No.
Oh. Well, then I just say one more time to you people watching this on TV, that, I believe it was June 28th, Mr. Kranz and Carolyn had a meeting of prospective school board members, and 3 people showed up. And there were 3 good candidates, people who expressed maybe an interest to be running for the board. The unfortunate thing is Dick probably is not going to run again. I may not run again. I know what Carolyn's plans are, but that means you got 3 people to fill 3 positions, and that's not the democratic way. I'd like to see a number of people running, and if you're not interested, talk to your neighbor. That's how I got on the school board. Dick Lee's hounded me so bad, I finally said, I'll do it. So go to your neighbor, if you know somebody who you think is a pretty good qualified individual, who thinks highly of Austin and Austin Public Schools, go over there and hound them. Because the filing deadline is July 28th to August 11th. So you've got some time to work on people, but if you don't want to work on yourself, work on somebody else. I put a little letter on the school website, and I hope some people read it, but I'm not too sure they did. But now is a very good time for you to step up to the plate and run for the school board. And like I said, if you get more votes than I do and I decide to run, I'll give you a great big elbow bump.
I'm glad you didn't say hug.
I'm not allowed.
Well, by November, hopefully we can be back.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice? All right, does anybody else have any reports?
Just on the national scope, the National School Boards Association, I'm part of an ad hoc committee that is looking at school equity policy on the national level and how we can address or approach some of the really important conversations that are happening nationally on the event of the equity and what's out there, and it's made up of people throughout the country, so it's exciting. This will be an ongoing thing throughout the year, and so the conversations are happening and they're sounding very positive, and people are wanting to come together and find solutions that are good for kids.
Great. Thank you, Angie. Do either of you have anything to report out?
I do not, thank you.
All right,
Me neither.
perfect, great. All right, we'll move on with our consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Dubay,
Yes?
Spots,
Yes.
Getz,
Yes.
Green, yes, Leathers,
Aye.
Lees,
Yeah.
Young.
All right, motion passes.
Can I make a comment?
You sure can.
Sharon, it's really hard to hear when you do the roll call when you're on that side of the thing, so you can scream out.
Okay.
That would be good.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Get your
Come on, Sharon.
Yeah.
We all need to use our teacher voices. We know we have them. All
That's
right.
the beauty of being last in the roll call, I just know it's me.
Oh, Peggy. All right. Moving on to
Wasn't that funny?
efficient and effective operations. In Brian Beasley's absence, we have Executive Director of Finance and Operations, Lori Volz, with the overview and request approval of the 10-year long-term facilities maintenance revenue plan.
Madam Chair Dubay, Superintendent Kranz School Board, for your consideration is our 10-year facility plan. It is 2 components. It's a 10-year synopsis of the long-term facility maintenance revenue and then the corresponding expenditure plan. And this is required by MDE for the calculation of our levy coming this fall. There's a funding stream that has, local levy as well as state aid for LTFM. So on the 10-year expenditure plan, a couple things I just want to point out, just to get a flavor of it, like for example, for the 2021 fiscal year, the LTFM revenue is calculating at basically 2.1 million on the revenue side. So we are compiling an expenditure plan that basically aligns with that revenue stream. And one thing I want to point out is that we have been, I'd say, saving up, setting aside some dollars in the reserve for LTFM for when we have to do two things. When we need to replace the running track and when we have to replace the turf. And those are very two expensive items. So basically in our 10-year plan, you'll see in the year 2025, we are starting to spend down that fund balance. So our expenses are a little more than that revenue coming in because we're tapping into fund balance. That's the year that right now the running track is slated to be replaced. That's why, for example, in site projects, you see 900,000 of expense there. Most of that is for that running track. And then the year after, in 2026, is when we're anticipating to have to replace the turf. And then after that fiscal year, we basically spend down that fund balance and then are in sync where we just expend what the revenue is coming in that year. So that's the highlights of the plan. This LTFM funding is so important for school districts to maintain their property and their buildings. And we are fortunate that the legislature improved the formula a couple years back. And so we are getting more of a funding stream and an improved level of funding for this particular category for our facilities.
The track now, that's, how old is that track?
Well, that track was put in when I was here before, so it has to be about 12
15.
years.
12 to 15 years.
Yeah,
How long do they typically last?
so it'll be about 20 years.
Which is,
For a running track,
that's a long
that's
time.
really good. And part of the reason of that, the lifespan being this long is that it was such a high quality track, this Mondo track. And so that is amazing.
Those that put in the asphalt tracks with the rubberized top, they're lucky to go 5 to 8 years, but don't need at least resurfacing.
What is the typical lifespan of the turf? I
They
wasn't
say
here
anywhere
for
from
this.
15 to 20 years.
Okay, I wasn't here for the
With the turf?
conversations the
Yeah.
first time around.
It all depends on the use.
Did both those turf fields go in the same time?
Yep.
So is there some sort of indicator of wear and tear on these things so that we can go, okay, we've got another year, another 2 years left?
Well, in fact, when Brian put this plan together, he had, I'll call it specialist consultants come in and assess the condition of the running track as well as the turf. So these recommendations are based on what these consultants are advising. And yes, like for example, there are some maintenance type things like on the running track, repairing some of the seams. We're doing that kind of thing now to extend the life. Yeah. And as far as the turf, it's the same type of measures. There's certain things we can do to extend the life of the turf. And so Brian definitely goes through those avenues of doing all he can to extend the life of the turf.
One thing that was important when we put the turf in, we bought the equipment to maintain it, to brush it, however you shake up those pellets and all that, so it keeps it up rather than it's all falling down and getting the wear and tear. So to keep that all even. The one thing that, you can almost see it after, this is our 4th year, where the walking track around the outside. The nice thing about that is that gets the wear and tear when it's in the dome, but during the regular season, it's the middle part that doesn't get the wear, that gets the wear and tear where the outside doesn't get as much. I think the important thing to keep in mind is we've got a good person who understands this long term, not just a short term, let's pay for it now, forget about it later, and that's critical. The other thing I wanted to point out, Lori's been battling this on her end from the finance side, at the state level, and myself, from the superintendent's level, is anytime there's a new addition of revenue, the legislators love to look at that. Well, you just got all this new money, can we take that and put it somewhere else? That talk was out there with the long-term facilities. Well, why don't we shift that now to help pay for some of the COVID things? Luckily, we've fought that battle this spring, but believe me, it's a battle that is going to be ongoing, so.
You know, you talk about Brian, we did the tour of the YMCA last winter, and we went through the boiler room, there were about 20 of us, and Mrs. Lynch goes, after we walked through, everybody left, we were standing there, her and me, and she goes, no, there's only one guy who knows anything about that boiler room, Brian Beasley. And she was right.
Yeah.
Say, speaking of wear and tear, has anybody ever talked about, maybe, looking at that floor at Hastings Gym? I know I've talked about that, and people are probably sick of me talking about it, but that's probably used an awful lot more than maybe the track.
Yeah,
That thing's older than the
I
track.
know Brian has, looked into it. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, what his potential solutions are, or where it's on the timeline.
I know he talked to me about it. I don't know if he was gonna add it to this cycle or not. But yeah, we've had those discussions.
Right, can we get a motion to approve the 10-year long-term facilities maintenance revenue plan?
So,
Second.
Second.
Thanks,
All
Lori.
right, thank you.
You had a hand in this, didn't you?
Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Dubay,
Yes.
Fox,
Yes.
Getz,
Yes.
Green,
Yes.
Leathers,
Aye.
Lees,
Yeah.
Young.
All right, motion passes. Thank you for all the work that has gone into that. Please pass that on to Brian. Next, we are going to hear an overview of the 2019-2020 radon testing results.
Madam Chair Dubay, Superintendent Krenz, board members, Brian has put together a report summarizing the radon test status, I guess you could say. And so we can see in the handout, basically it lists all our complexes, our school buildings, including like Westcott Field. And just as a side note, the district, we're required to conduct radon tests every 5 years, once every 5 years. So last fiscal year, we did half of the sites, and then this year we did the other half. So now we have, in essence, caught up. Basically, the radon test came back very favorably. There were 2 sites we had to do second round of testing, because of the levels, the threshold of the levels. So Oakland Education Center was one that we went back and tested again, and that one now passed. And then Westcott Field, we will have to circle back and test again. The key for retesting is that HVAC has to be functioning. If you have negative air, it, I'll just say kind of skews the test results. So since HVAC hasn't been running there, Brian's planning to, once that HVAC is running again, he'll circle back and do that retesting for Westcott.
Sounds good.
What do they do for that radon?
If they can't get the results at appropriate level,
Yes.
like the HVAC is a huge component of it, so I know that is part of the solution, is making sure that's functioning correctly.
I would guess that the basements in Austin wouldn't test out very good.
Right.
Who's this, regulation put out, the state or?
Yeah, it is, it's a health and safety regulation, and we use our consultant IEA for conducting the tests. And so, you know, we follow the recommendations and make sure we're testing on the schedule that's recommended, and so our district's in a really good place. I've heard there's some districts that are not up to snuff, and I'm very pleased that we take this seriously and we make sure we get our testing completed.
So you go out and you buy a couple hundred kits, and you place them in various spots, and then you check them for their,
Like, just to give an example, like at Banfield Elementary, there were 67 samples taken. Sumner was 39, so Southgate was 68, so it involves a lot of different testing.
would you use one kit to make all those samples from Banfield, you think?
No, it's,
Um,
they place these little,
Sensors.
All over the place?
whatever, yep.
Okay,
That just, his report says the radon test kits are analyzed by Air Check, is incorporated. There's the lab.
And that basically is a fairly new requirement in the last 3 to 4 years, I think.
Somebody came up.
does that like cause cancer or things of that nature, radon?
Definitely health issues.
Well, you know, especially with this COVID-19 being in the air, you wanna have good ventilation.
Well, and you know, we've spent, well, it started back in '09 when they started replacing all the HVAC in the district, and then with the high school upgrade. So all of our systems are at code or better, because of all the time. And again, that wasn't new additional money to our taxpayers, it was based out of all of the, capital money and maintenance money that we never received, so. I think this community, and I've said it 100 times, has done a great job maintaining our facilities.
All right, we're gonna keep moving forward. Next, we have the request approval of the donations with Executive Director of Finance and Operations, Lori Waltz.
Madam Chair of Debate, Superintendent Kranz, board members. We have a number of really nice donations again this month. We have an anonymous donation of $3,500. A recipient is the Community Learning Center and the purpose for gym mats. Another anonymous donation of $2,500, Southgate Elementary being the recipient for books and academic supplies. Shamel Electric donated a projection screen valued at $1,600 for the Austin High School. Westminster Presbyterian Church donated $200 for Community Ed, More Than Pink program. We have 5 donors for $250 for the high school jazz band. This is a commission piece in memory of Ben Bednar. Mighty Cause is a donor of $45.88 for the high school music department for general expenses.
Fantastic.
That's our
We
list.
have a very generous community.
That's wonderful.
I'm very thankful for that. Can I get a motion to approve the donations?
So moved.
So moved.
Can you get a second?
I think Angie was.
Angie moved.
I'll
Dick
second.
seconded.
We'll say that Dick seconded, yes, okay. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Dubay,
Yes.
Fox.
Yes.
Getz. Getz,
Angie?
Yes?
Green,
Yes.
Leathers,
Aye.
Lees,
Yep.
Young.
Alright.
All right, motion passes, thank you. And finally from Lori, we have the request approval of the 2020 Truth and Taxation hearing date.
Madam Chair Debate, Superintendent Kranz, board members, I recommend establishing our date for the Truth and Taxation hearing for Monday, December 14th, 2020. The Truth and Taxation hearing would start at 6 p.m. or later, and it would be as part of the regular school board meeting. And this is to fit with the compliance through the statute of our Truth and Taxation hearing being held before the board approves the 20 payable 21 levy.
Can I get a motion to approve the 2020 Truth and Taxation hearing date?
So move.
Roll call vote?
Dubay,
Yes?
Fox,
Yes.
Getz. Green,
Yes.
Leathers,
Aye.
Lees,
Yes.
and Young.
Whatever happened to our hotel? Remember that?
They built it out by the freeway.
Yeah.
It's open now.
No, the one that,
Remember
it's gonna be by the Paramount
that?
Theater.
The county commissioners unanimously voted it down.
Okay, that's what I asked.
Nobody's come back to us for any.
Pardon?
They never came.
You're good. I think your sound is, catching, Angie. I think you're good now, though.
Before we move on, I know we didn't have reports from John or Sherry or Jen. I'd like Sherry to I see her hiding out in the hallway there, to give a quick update on our extended school year. We were talking today, just to kind of give you an indication of the mood of the community and sending their kids back to school. Sherry?
Sure, so we've been able to start 4 of our extended school year special ed summer school classes on site. 2 started last week and 2 started today. 2 at Aston High School that started last week, and the two that started today are at Ellis Middle School and IJ Bolton. The rest of our ESY classrooms did remain in distance learning, and that was due to some concerns, either due to the significance of the disabilities of the students with maintaining social distancing or the age of the students with maintaining social distancing. The ones that started last week and today, there's anywhere from 4 to 6 students in each classroom, so not very large numbers. There are some students from those classrooms whose parents chose not to send their child, and so we're offering a distance learning option for those. But the kids seem happy to be in school, the staff seem happy to be there. It's just, feels good to have a few kids at least back in the buildings.
Great. Thank you for that update.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
We're still doing that tax abatement, is that still in existence?
Yep.
So we haven't heard any of those for quite some time, have we?
No, but we got one.
August.
Okay.
But I see according to the radio this morning that they're starting a new, affordable housing complex over by Keene Motors.
Right, they're not using that tax abatement, they're doing a different
Yeah,
mechanism.
yeah. But that's good news, isn't it?
Yeah, huge. I wrote a letter of support in that because it is for affordable housing, that, for them to gain the access to the city.
Great.
That 82 unit apartment out by where I am, I've heard it's full.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it filled up like in
Yeah.
less than a month, I
Yeah.
think.
It filled up very fast.
What's that called, like Spygate or Spy?
No. Flats on 28. Not.
Who knows, right?
All right, we have one more agenda item. Let's keep moving forward. Finally, we have the request approval of the appointment of John Alberts as our LEA, or Local Educational Agency Title Grants Representative for the 2020-2021 school year with Superintendent Krebs.
See, John actually asked me to stall, and maybe we'd forget about that.
Oh.
We have to have a representative who takes care of our title funds and those sort of things. So John's been it for years, and I think he'd be disappointed if we didn't reappoint him as that.
Sounds great.
So
Sure you are.
this will be his title from now on then?
Yeah.
One of many.
Yeah.
All right, can I get a motion to approve John Alberts as our LEA representative for the 2020-2021 school year?
So moved.
Second.
Can I get a roll call vote?
Dubay,
Yes.
Fox,
Yes.
Getz,
Yes.
Green,
Yes.
Leathers,
Aye.
Lees.
Yep.
Young.
All right, motion passes. Congratulations on your new position.
John Jason Brand on KOS this morning said it was the most important item on the agenda tonight. You did.
All right, this is a reminder that we do not have a study session scheduled for July, so our next meeting will be our regularly August meeting. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Can I have one question? We had talked about meeting in McPhail. Is there a timeline when that might be happening?
we had our construction meeting this morning, and it's close, they're saying by the end of July. I don't know if we're pushing it by making it our August meeting or not, we'll let you
So
know.
it's close.
It's close, yeah.
Didn't you somewhere on your week of review list, McPhail being like in September, something like that? And when your week in review, you had future meetings or future events, and I thought I saw one.
I might have done that. That's,
I'll disregard that.
well, that's hopefully our plan,
Okay.
Let's
So-
just, wait for when it's ready,
yeah,
and at that point in time, we can,
it's getting
Make that
close,
transition.
it is getting close.
alright, I heard Peggy give me a motion, so
Okay.
I need a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Right, we are adjourned, thank you all, have a wonderful evening.